No, you're good. Yeah, we're on your schedule. Yeah.
Sean, we are on. So, yeah.
All right.
So why don't we get this started off?
So, Life Living the Grind, we're coming to you live on location. Oaksbrook.
And we're very lucky to have a huge name guest. You're the only guest who should be introducing us on our show because of how well known you are. But I will say this, one surprising thing was a political article on you a couple of years back that described you as the biggest name you've never heard of. That's clearly changed. Tell us about how that goes and how that reputation came and how you've been able to make a name for yourself as a liberal in a very conservative media.
You mean talk radio?
Talk radio.
Yeah. I've been doing this show. Persistence is the bottom line. I mean, I've been doing my show for 15 years. I read a lot of books. That helps. And you just do a good show and do it every day. And eventually people figure out you're there. It's just, I don't think anything ever trumps persistence.
Yeah, absolutely. So now we're here in, Oakbrook Terrace. We're in DuPage. Obviously, a very changing landscape over the last, 8 to 10 years. Now we're kind of a blue county. What do you see us kind of going into this 2020 kind of this crazy political landscape that you probably haven't seen in a long time? You've been around 15 years. Have you ever seen anything like that we have going on in the White House and everything?
No, I don't. We've never had a president like this in the history of the United States. 16,000 lies in 3 years. I mean, it's just. I think Obama got nailed for saying if you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. When that was true only for 97% of Americans, 3% lost their doctors. That was his big lie. I mean, and that was a scandal, right? It's just astonishing to have a pathological liar in the White House.
Yeah.
I don't know how we handle this, and now we've got this public health emergency that because the administration didn't order up testing kits. I mean, South Korea's just tested a couple 100,000 people and found that they've got 3,000 or 6,000 cases floating around. A lot of them are not yet symptomatic, but they're shedding virus all over the place, and we have no idea how many cases we have in the United States. They flew these these people back from Wuhan, China, and first to Japan. And when they got them from China to Japan, they found they were all supposed to be people who were free of the virus. And they found that 14 of them had the virus. And the CDC said those 14 people had to fly back on a separate plane so that they don't transmit it to everybody else. And Mike Pompeo and Alec Azar, State Department and HHS, overruled them, said they didn't want the expense of the second plane. And so they all flew back together. And then HHS had the people who separate kids from their parents at the border, flew them to California to meet the plane without protective gear, without any training in public health, shaking people's hands. And then those people went out into their community. And that appears to be why we've got community transmission right now of this virus. I mean, this is nuts. This is incompetence raised to an art form.
And it's affecting potentially the entire country.
I just came from Portland. The city is shutting down.
Yeah, I mean, this is some horrifying stuff. 100%. Yeah. So, I'm in organizing with the Bricklayers Union. My partner here, Razas.
Representing television station engineers. And I'll tell you, as an engineer who's out there covering the news, some of our guys are worried. What kind of protection do we need when we go out there? And clearly,
that's right.
Like this flight we're talking about, there was a plastic sheet separating those who were infected from those who were healthy.
Right, while the plane's circulating air inside the plane. And then they get off the plane and they're all mingled together so that the HHS guys can meet them and give them the keys to their rooms and things. And it was just and the CDC was melting down. I mean, they were saying, how can you do this? This is insane. And then when they issued the press release, CDC specifically demanded that their name not be on the press release, that these people have been repatriated because they were so opposed to the way it happened.
So needless to say, this administration is made, like you say, 16,000 lies, mistake after mistake. How does the labor movement help shift into a normal president in 2020? How do we get to a place, and as labor unions, how do we do our part?
It's my hope that America as a whole is going to want a normal guy or girl for president in 2020. And Herbert Hoover's campaign in 1920, his campaign slogan was a return to normalcy. Of course, it was after World War I and the Spanish flu and the disaster and Woodrow Wilson and all this stuff. And the subtext to that was reducing taxes. But I think a return to normalcy is probably going to be the slogan of the next president.
Yeah, which is crazy. You said you've never seen anything like it.
Yeah.
And how disastrous could it be if he wins again?
Yeah. I think it's the end of our democratic form of government. I mean, he has now turned the Justice Department into the punish your enemies and help your friends department. Something that has never in the history of the United States happened. The Justice Department's never been politicized. That has happened. The scientists at the CDC, they moved them all out to Kansas City, Missouri, and half of them were not willing to make the move, which is why they did it. So, they got rid of a whole bunch of scientists. The scientists at the Interior Department are gone. They've been replaced with lobbyists. And so the Interior Department is taking, sacred burial grounds and national monuments and bringing in the oil companies and the drilling companies. They're selling off our country for pennies on the dollar to their political donors. Pick an agency, right? There's not an agency that is not being ripped apart. Yeah, morale at the FBI has fallen through the floor. People are scared to death. And now he's got, his 29-year-old former body double, a 6'2" big burly guy who kind of looks like Donald Trump from the back. That was his job, Trump's body double. He's now in charge of the program where they're going through campaign contributions for all the people who work for the federal government to find the ones that have campaigned who have donated money to Democrats so that they can purge them. I mean, this is insane.
So unprecedented stuff. And no one
beyond unprecedented. It's unprecedented for the United States. This is exactly how it happened in Hungary with Orban. This is exactly what's going on right now in the Philippines with Duterte. This is what happened 10 years ago in Russia. This is what happened it's happening in Poland right now with Duda. This is what Pinochet did 40 years ago in Chile. There is a handbook here. I mean, there is a script that's being followed, and it's what happened in Germany in the 30s. It's what happened in Italy in the late 20s. It's what happened in Spain, right after the Spanish Revolution, and held until 1967. This is not novel. This is not like bizarre or new or something nobody's ever seen before. It's just novel to the United States.
So we have this young generation kind of coming up in the world, right? These new millennials that are resurging and these 18-year-olds that are voting. Do you think that's going to be a shift? Do you think young people are more mobilizing to see change?
Yes. And part of it is, the idealism of youth and young people have, it's the most plugged in generation. That's a very well-informed generation. But the other part of it is it's also the most racially diverse generation that we've had, ever. Yeah. And increasingly the Republican Party is defining itself as the party of white people and or even white supremacists. And the Democratic Party is far more inclusive, as is labor, which is a great thing. I mean, labor has really since the 60s, labor has been at the forefront of diversity in the workplace. So
let's talk about the Democratic Party. There's a lot of people who are saying there's too many factions, that none of the candidates are getting as plurality with their delegates. Is this going to be a problem? Now there's talk about a white man candidate coming in and potentially saving the Democrats.
Right.
It's this whole
save us from Bernie, right?
Yeah, we know better than the voters. Let's go this way.
Yeah.
What do you have to say to that mentality?
I am very concerned. But I'm not, I'm not yet ready to get hysterical. I'm just very concerned that if, I don't know the statistics here in Illinois, but I know in Wisconsin, in the 2016 election, 200,000 fewer Democrats voted than voted 4 years earlier for Obama's reelection. 200,000 Democratic voters simply didn't show up. And I think part of it was, but most of it was people were not excited about the candidate.
And Hillary never went to.
Well, she never. Not only she never go to Wisconsin, but she wasn't saying, "I'm going to change things." This system has been corrupted. It's been corrupted by Supreme Court decisions. It's been corrupted by politicians. It's been corrupted by billionaires, and I'm going to change things. She never said that. Her message was, let's just kind of keep things going the way they are. And people don't like things the way they are. People are having to work 2 and 3 jobs.
It's not working.
The wages are falling apart. Yeah, exactly. You've got student debt that you've never seen. I mean, literally prior to the 1990s, we didn't have student debt in the United States. I mean, now it's a $1.7 trillion, debt. It's massive. People, 40 years ago, you could have a good union job and one person could support a family, buy a house, put their kids through college. Yeah, that's still the case for union employees, but that's 6% of the private population. Which
is the lowest it's been
ever.
Yeah.
Well, since the
1930s,
30s, since unions were legalized, basically.
Yeah. But that's a scary thing too. I mean, like I said, one thing that we like to do, and like you talk about diversity. I mean, we're 2 diverse people, but we have one thing in common, which is just resurging this labor movement.
Sure.
And trying to bring a voice to this new, millennial generation through technology, through shows and everything. But I mean, it's so important. And I don't know how much people know what unions are to the whole country and to the Democratic Party.
I think people understand worker dignity and people respect that, but they don't understand how labor plays in the role. And as 2 relatively young guys, I think that's the voice that we're trying to get.
Yeah.
And listening to your show, that's obviously the message behind what you do.
Sure.
So tell me how you found people to be receptive of that, or is it still a persistent?
When you tell people that if they have a union job, they're going to have job security, they're going to have good pay, they're going to have good benefits. Who doesn't want that? Increasingly, I think it's a message that has a lot of resonance. And this whole, Rush Limbaugh, union bosses, they're all robbing you, blah, 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 is increasingly being seen for the BS that it is. Fortunately. I'm curious what you guys are hearing from your union folks about, thoughts about the coming election.
I mean, sadly, they always say 40% of union membership votes for Republicans vote Donald Trump.
That was not the case before 1980. But
yeah, exactly. And I don't disagree with it, but I always say it depends where you're at, right? I mean, when you have down south, Republican voters, union members, it is what it is, right?
Yeah.
They were growing up a whole certain way, and now they're in the union, and it's hard for me to change them. In our district council, the bricklayers, we cover 9 counties. It's all pretty blue. I think majority of them are excited. We do a labor history class where myself and a few others teach labor history and unionism to all of our apprentices. Right when you get in, we hammer it, how important the unions are. So I think as long as you're engaging them, I think they are excited for change. I don't know really where they're at. I know younger people like Bernie, but I think at this point they want anything other than any
warm body that can
But a booming economy is it's scary because people are like, look how much we're working.
We'll see if that booming economy sticks around.
Well, exactly, and I have a feeling it may not.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, our union, we maintain a position of neutrality, just like the News Guild.
Sure.
David does because we cover journalists. But what I will say is a concern of members is this corporatization of media.
Yes.
As you may have heard in Chicago, CLTV, which is a voice of suburban news, as well as how with the Tribune, the Hoy newspaper that represented the Hispanic market being cut. There's just less voices getting that message out there. So in our industry, that's a concern we're watching very closely. You yourself being someone in the media, adept with media, what's your feeling on this? I know from our union, we do more about get out the vote effort. Not to be partisan, but to encourage people to vote their conscience in their heart.
Yeah.
But when it comes down to the voices, media that covers what's going on, what are your thoughts about this?
Well, prior to 1996, there was a law that said that a single company or individual couldn't own a newspaper, a television station, and a radio station in a single market. That there had to be a certain percentage of local ownership for all radio and television stations and newspapers. That got blown up in 96 when Bill Clinton signed the Telecommunications Act of 96. And you saw Clear Channel go from owning 100 small stations around the country, radio stations, to owning over 1,000 within a year and a half. And then putting Rush Limbaugh on a whole bunch of them. And so, we've seen massive consolidation in the media. And it's killing off small and local papers. I mean, our paper in Oregon, the Oregonian, is owned by a company out of New York. It's like, really? It's like.
Yeah. I mentioned another thing, Chinese Global Television Network, which is the media entity of CCTV out of China. We have, I read in the New York Times, I believe it was yesterday, there's an effort to see if they should be registered as a foreign agent.
Right, yeah. Yeah, they did that with RT and Sputnik and for Russia.
I mean, what kind of a message does that send in a country that touts freedom of the press, whatever else? Is this a dangerous precedent, or is it good to regulate?
I'm ambivalent about that. I think that if you've got foreign media, foreign-owned media, I mean, keep in mind, Fox News was 7% owned by his name was bin Talaweed. I forget his first name, maybe Mohammed. He was a Saudi billionaire. He owned 7% of Fox News up until just a few years ago, and it kind of got hot, and so he had to divest himself of it. But I think that it's a good thing to have domestic ownership rules. And Chinese TV and Russian TV now. I was on RT for a couple of years, and that was back when they were trying to compete with BBC and with Al Jazeera, and everybody was kind of getting into the act. And but now in the last 4 years, basically since Trump became president, it's all become all Trump all the time. Cheerleading for Trump. Who's cheerleading for the Russians? So I'm not opposed to foreign-owned media having to jump through more hoops than domestically owned media, whatever they may be. I don't think we should keep them out.
But it's important to have a voice on our side. It's important to talk about truth and talk about facts. In this day and age of social media, I mean, people just want it quick. They just see a headline. They don't care about it. They share it. They don't read it. The
first radio network that I was on in 2003 was the IE America radio network. It was owned by the UAW out of Detroit. And the guy who was the president of the UAW at the time died, and the guy who replaced him said, we don't need a radio network, and did away with it. But it was a pretty good little network there, and I think labor really needs to be, labor needs a media strategy.
Yeah, and there really is none. I mean, we talk about there's really kind of a wide open market for a niche that's not really there.
It's very interesting because we started this not too long ago. We've noticed just a bunch of followers, likes coming, because I think it filled a void that people were waiting for, kind of people to talk about issues where they can weigh in, where they can talk, and they just weren't getting it, which I personally feel might have been a big part of our growth, is that we were filling that need.
Yeah,
but clearly
there you go.
There was a need, just like your show.
Yeah, and you've paved the way, obviously, for us. I mean, you've been in it. I mean, we are huge fans. I mean, it's great to see, what you have going on, and hopefully, we could kind of spark
step by step. We'll all get there.
And kind of, spark some other people.
I will say this: you've read obviously a lot, but you've written a lot too. Tell us about what you're working on.
I just finished a book that will be out this fall called "The Hidden History of Monopoly and the Destruction of the American Dream," and that will be followed by a book I'm working on right now, which will be out next spring, called "The Hidden History of Oligarchy and the Destruction of Democracy." So, and the first book in this series, we're doing a series of small books, 35,000 word, 180 page books. The first one was Guns and the Second Amendment. The second one was the Supreme Court. The third one that just came out is the Republican War on Voting. And, then it'll be Monopoly and Oligarchy. And then the one after that will be the healthcare system, a book on the healthcare system.
And it's funny you say guns and the Second Amendment, because that's a huge one for a lot of the union members are huge Second Amendment, right? And that's great, but
you got a lot of hunters,
And 100%. But
this
I think
is the Midwest.
So important
I grew up in Michigan.
Yeah, and it's
my
so
friends all went hunting.
To know the truth of it. You know what I mean? To absolutely know what really is going on.
Yeah.
And that, no one's here to take all your guns. No one's here to.
Nobody's even talking about that.
No one's even talking. Exactly. So that's a big thing that I think we try to press over and over again to our members. We need wages. We need good careers. That's what this country needs. We need a booming economy like it used to be,
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely.
So what's your message to the crowd when you get out there? How do you plan to inspire this group of mass to kind of get out there, get out the vote, and make some of these changes?
Well, I think that we need to understand what we're up against right now. The voter suppression machine of the Republican Party has become very, very effective and very, very well fine-tuned, and that's not a good thing. And most people really don't know about it. They don't know how it works. And I drove to the airport on our socialist roads, kept safe by our socialist police departments. I was able to leave my home and not worry about it because it's protected by our socialist fire departments. I was able to read the stop signs and highway signs because I got a good education in our socialist public schools. I mean, all of this, the Republicans, and it doesn't matter if it's Bernie. I mean, if it's Joe Biden, they're going to call him a socialist, no matter who it is. And I think and I'm on Social Security and Medicare, which is great. I think Americans just don't. I think most Americans have figured out that this whole, let's be afraid of the Democrats, let's be afraid of socialism, let's be afraid of government doing things for people, particularly in a time of crisis as this virus starts spreading across the United States. I don't think that argument's going to fly anymore.
And how do the Democrats then flip that script, and how do we overpower it with a fear of stagnant wages, a fear of, like you say, student loan debt? Like, how does the Democrats sell that?
Well, you offer solutions.
And that's it.
It's very simple.
Solutions? Do you see anyone that stands out more than the rest?
My personal preference is for either Sanders or Warren. They're the two solid progressives. They're the ones who are saying, if Trump can give $1.5 trillion in tax breaks and cuts to billionaires, that's how much student debt is out there. He could have wiped out student debt, like that, and it would have had the same impact. It actually would have stimulated the economy more than tax cuts, because then you'd have young people buying homes and starting businesses and getting married and having families, but they're not doing it right now because they're in debt. So a lot of these things that are being proposed, wiping out student debt, making state colleges and universities free like they used to be. Reagan ended that in California, the largest university system in the United States. It's totally free. This is true of pretty much every other developed country in the world. We can do these things. A national healthcare system, it'll save us. The Lancet just published this study out of Yale University. The Lancet is the most respected medical journal in the world. It's the British Medical Journal. And that a Medicare for all system in the United States would save, a little less than $1 trillion a year in the United States and 68,000 lives a year. People are learning these things,
Well, as people have less and less, I think it kind of gets everybody fired up. And I think Democrats in general need to get fired up for something to kind of motivate them and get them going. So I think people are starting to see it. I mean, I know within our apprenticeship program, our average age now is about 25 to 35, and they're all bachelor degrees. They all have college education.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and now you're here because it didn't work.
Yeah.
And now you have debt, and there was no opportunities.
Yeah.
So I think now I hope we see a resurgence too within this labor movement, where they get in young, 18 years old, and get that career and kind of get that fight and drive to get back this middle class that everyone keeps talking about. I don't even know what the middle class is anymore. It's slipping away.
Yeah. Well, when Reagan came into office, about 64% of Americans were middle class, meaning that one person's salary could allow a family to buy a house, buy a car, take vacations, raise their kids, put them through school, put them through college. We slipped below 50% last year.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a punch to the gut of America, of American working people. Yeah.
In the greatest country, right? And we talk about the greatest.
Well, we're certainly the richest country in the world, but all of those riches are now, piled up at the top.
Yeah. Well, one thing I could say before we let you go, I know you probably got to run around. To speak on DuPage, I know that we have nothing but great candidates. We got great elected officials from trustee all the way up to the Congress. So, I mean, the good thing, at least in DuPage, is we've really gone from a completely red county to almost a completely blue county. Come 2020, we're going to have the DuPage County Board. So it's kind of crazy to see our shift, at least in Illinois, and hopefully other states kind of pick up these trends of how important it is to have a blue state. We have the highest union wages, and we have a great system and a great state.
We want to thank you so much for joining us on this show.
My pleasure.
And if you're ever looking for some young leaders to be on your show, like Love and
Okay.
we've got a lot
got
of viewers, listeners who are anxious to see us as well. So thank you for sharing your time with us.
My pleasure.
You're a busy man, so thank you again.
We're excited
Thanks
to
for
hear
having
that.
me on.
Yeah, thank you.
Great to see you guys.
We'll join you guys in a few minutes.